southeastern quarter of the U.S., laying eggs as they go.
If you imagine monarchs as kind of this wave of insects that are moving northward and eastward, they're looking for specific kinds of habitat along the way.
Habitat that must include milkweed. It's the only kind of plant that the caterpillars can eat, as well as other nectar sources for the adults. Now, let's pause for a moment here and consider the monarchs laying their little eggs on the milkweed. When Oberhauser described it to me, I was reminded just how astonishing that transformation is from egg into adult.
We have this caterpillar that's kind of like a worm. They're this earthbound thing that's kind of squishy and kind of mushy. And then they go through this transformation where it's almost like they die when they get into the chrysalis. So they're in this stage that, from the outside at least, they don't even look alive. And then they transform into this incredibly beautiful organism that throws off the chains of the earth and is able to fly away.
Okay, back to the journey. The butterflies from Mexico live no more than a month after leaving their overwintering mountaintops and laying their eggs. And so it's this next generation, born in the southeastern U.S. in what's called their spring range, that pick up the next chapter of the migration,
which goes northward into what we call their summer breeding range. So this is everything kind of from a line through the middle of the United States up into southern Canada.
The migration is filled with peril. Butterfly eggs are gobbled down by ants and spiders and wasps. Most animals avoid eating the adult monarchs because they taste bad, but there are a couple types of birds that do find them palatable: the black-headed grosbeak and the black-backed oriole. Then there's bad weather. A drought or a really bad storm can decimate the monarch numbers. But perhaps the biggest threat on their journey these days is habitat destruction. And that habitat consists of milkweed.
The middle of the United States used to be one big prairie, and all of that land was suitable habitat. We now have a patchwork of cities and agricultural fields broken up by completely inappropriate habitat, which would be things like roads and parking lots.
Oberhauser told me that cities aren't necessarily bad for monarchs. Take Minneapolis, where residents have planted milkweed and other butterfly-friendly plants in parks, lawns, and gardens. Still, a city means a lot less monarch habitat than before. Agricultural fields used to be okay, with lots of milkweed mingling with the crops. But now, in this age of genetically modified corn and soybeans, farmers spray their fields with herbicides that wipe out the milkweed. All this disrupted habitat makes the going much tougher for the monarchs, and over the last few years, their numbers are down. But there are still many butterflies that do make it, that find milkweed and that lay more eggs.
They go through 2 or 3 more generations in the northern part of their range, breeding, laying eggs, finding milkweed plants, and then after about August 15th, the butterflies fly south again to the overwintering sites in Mexico. Yeah, it's incredible.
No one butterfly completes the whole journey. And for those of you keeping score, it takes up to 4 generations to finish the full migration, to leave Mexico and to get back again. Now, that's just one part of the story told from the butterfly's point of view. But over the course of their journey, those butterflies come in contact with a kind of human army, thousands of citizen scientists, everyday people allowing us to get to know these monarchs better and help them out along their way. So let's rewind the clock to September, once the butterflies have begun flying south again. We're going to zoom in here on Cape May, New Jersey, where Mark Garland is a naturalist.
We get an abnormal number of monarchs here because we're the very southern tip of New Jersey, and the land is literally tapering like a funnel. And as these butterflies migrate, they're much more comfortable over land than water, so they stay over land and get funneled down into Cape May proper. Literally, when there's a lot of monarchs around, they're everywhere. We laugh. Sometimes you feel like you're inside an orange snow globe.
But Garland doesn't just watch the monarchs, he tags them. It's part of a citizen science project run out of the University of Kansas called Monarch Watch.
The tagging involves small adhesive stickers that are put on the wings of a monarch butterfly. The size of the sticker is about the same as your little fingernail.
By the time you catch it, put the sticker on and let it go. It's 30 seconds if you're good, if you've been doing it a long time.
That's Garland's wife, Paige Cunningham. She's a naturalist and educator, and she told me that before she lets the butterflies go, she whispers to them.
Sometimes I'm just like, have a good journey. Sometimes I wish them good luck. I don't always know what I'm going to say to them until I have them in my hand. I don't know, it's like a secret in a bottle, or a wish, or a hope, or a dream, or something, and then it flies away.
Cunningham and Garland recruit a bunch of people, and each year the team dots hundreds of butterfly wings with these tiny sticker tags.
On the tag is a unique code of 3 letters and 3 numbers, like the social security number of the butterfly.
And it's this social security number here that can be used to track the butterflies along their migration route, where other people catch them and read off the code.
Every time a tagged monarch is found somewhere else, you've connected the dots on migration. We found monarchs here in Cape May that have been tagged in New York State and Pennsylvania and other parts of New Jersey.
And the butterflies routing through Cape May have been found as far south as Florida, Texas, even Mexico. And there have been a few New Jersey monarchs that the wind's blown out to the Bahamas. Now, some of the butterflies pass through Georgia, where Mary Beth Carey teaches the 5th grade in the town of Sylvester.
I want the students to use the butterflies to connect with and go beyond the boundaries of our town.
For the last few years, she and her students have been taking Scotch tape, placing it on monarch butterfly abdomens, peeling it off, and sending it to the University of Georgia. That's where a program called Monarch Health counts up the number of external parasites on the butterflies to figure out how healthy they are. Carrie's students love being part of the butterflies' lives.
I really like working with insects. We should help them.
As the butterflies flutter along, countless people are on the lookout, entering their sighting locations, and some of them recorded themselves to tell us about their encounters, all the way from Brackettville, Texas.
Right now, I'm surrounded by trees with beautiful arcing limbs. The butterflies, I can't believe they're still here. I'm so excited.
To Vermont, where the state butterfly is the monarch.
When I was little, my mom would buy me the grow a monarch butterfly kit, and we would watch them in our house until they grew up, and then we would set them free.
To Wisconsin.
Butterflies are beautiful, and they are wonderful.
To North Carolina.
I've been watching monarchs all my life.
My wife came up with the theme of monarchs for our wedding. On our custom-made cake topper, the bride and groom chased a monarch hand in hand, with the groom holding a butterfly net.
You get the idea. Monarch butterfly lovers are everywhere. So let's return to the end of the monarch journey one more time. As the butterflies make their way back towards Mexico, they gather into thicker and thicker ribbons as they fly. By the time they hit Texas, the monarchs stop people in their tracks.
They cluster up in these pecan trees like grapes and just are draped everywhere. As you walk down the river trail, they just erupt in these butterfly clouds of orange. My house looks out onto the sunset in Mexico, seeing hundreds of thousands of monarchs almost flowing like a river through the sky.
That river flows back into Mexico, winding around the mountaintops to settle down for another winter. It's a river of orange sunshine that graces the people it passes, and many of those people reach out to touch that river and to hold, if even for a moment, a single butterfly in their hands.
These are the stages of my metamorphosis. We start with the egg, and we're calling that day 0. And then each of the caterpillars, after they molt, they get to be labeled as the next instar. So about day 3, after the egg is laid, the little caterpillar comes out, and then 3 days later it sheds its skin, turns around and eats its skin, and then continues to eat more milkweed. Day 9, another shed of skin, another molt. And day 12 becomes a 4th instar, and then finally the 5th instar on day 18. That same day, it does the J, as I was showing some of you earlier. It spits out a little pellet of silk, and underneath of a leaf, or sometimes under the deck floor or rock crack, or somewhere where it's safe. It turns around and sticks its hind legs in that silk button and lets go, and that's when you get the J shape. So about 8 hours later, that skin starts to open up at the bottom and rolls up to the top of the developing chrysalis, and then finally falls off. I've got a video of that coming up. So it takes about 1 minute, and then another minute later, it's starting to look like more like a chrysalis, and then after half an hour, it's pretty well in its final shape. And then about 12 days later, you can see the wings inside the chrysalis, and it's really, you can see the black, veins inside. And then it comes out of the chrysalis, about 5 minutes, it looks like that. And then 6 hours later, it's ready to fly.
It has to pump its body fluid into each of those veins until they're fully extended. Then it has to dry so that the wings are stiff, because it couldn't, like an airplane can't fly with a
Floppy wings.
A floppy wing. Their wings have to be stiff. So that takes a few hours.
Jim, are they full size when they come out of that, like at the 5-minute post there?
Not 5 minutes, but at 30 minutes they are.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It is very cool. Because when they come out, they're all folded up, right? They're all came out of that little thing that's about 1 inch long.
So this is just a graph that shows what happens after they leave Mexico. They have 3 summer generations, and then sometimes a 4th before they come to the final generation, which is here labeled the 4th generation. That's the one that we're tagging now.
0% progress bar. Preparing HP Performance Advisor window. Next button. Alt+N. Depth banner bitmap. Image. MSI horizontal line. Image.
I don't know where that
MSI horizontal line.
Coming from.
Image. Welcome to the HP Performance Advisor window. Cancel button. Depth banner bitmap. Image.
So it's a 3,000 kilometer journey. It takes somewhere around 2 months. I think they average about 50 miles a day. Kilometers, I don't know. Anyway.
So do your ones that you tag, do they make it all the way to Mexico then, or?
We've had 130 make it over the past 20 years.
So the generation thing, what was that about?
The summer generations just last about a month. So they close, they're born, they mate, they lay eggs, and they die.
Oh, okay.
Each female lays around 500 eggs.
Oh, so now they don't tag them on the way up then?
No. And we wait until they're into their 4th generation, the great-grandparents of the ones who left Mexico, grandchildren,
right.
before we start tagging.
Interesting, yeah.
So there's what an egg looks like on a milkweed leaf. It's about the size of a pinhead.
That is really small.
This is why we need milkweed in our gardens, because it's the only thing that the monarchs eat. The eggs, larvae.
That's what one looks like under a microscope. It's got some severe ridging to it. It's you can actually see those ridges with a little magnifying glass. And here's one, you can see the larva. That's the head of the larva, that black top. So this is an egg that's about 4 days old. It's about ready to hatch. And I stuck it under the microscope, and I got these shots of the larva starting to make a little hole, and then a bigger hole, and then you find it in the right bottom corner. You see that picture is that's the head of the larva coming out of the egg. And there he is coming out.
They look like a tiny piece of thread at this point. They're so tiny.
Is there male and female?
Yes.
I'll show you how to tell later.
Oh, okay.
But when we go to the school to do this with kindergarten, they love finding out whether it's boy or girl. When they let one go from their fingers, of course, they want a girl. It's a little girl.
So when they come out, they eat their eggshell, and then they start eating the milkweed leaf that the egg is on. And that sticky stuff that comes out, that milky stuff, is really a latex, and it's quite sticky, and then little larvae can get stuck in it. So what they do is, you see that the main stem of the leaf there, but they cut that semicircle in the leaf, and so the latex, when it leaks out, it stays on the other side of where they're sitting, so they don't get stuck in it. Smart, eh? And after they molt, they eat their shed skin, and then go back to the milkweed. Eating machines, night and day. Sometimes, if I've got 40 or 50 of them that I'm trying to feed, I'm out 2 or 3 times a day trying to get more milkweed to feed them. Here's a little video of the one chewing. So there's the 5th instar, 3,000 times its birth weight. We'd be the size of a bus if we grew that same proportion. And it hangs in the J.
Is that how much of the milkweed that it actually ate?
Sorry?
Is that how much of the milkweed that it actually ate?
I mean, during its lifetime, it eats many leaves. That's why I have to keep going getting more. So you're going to see this cremaster talked about, and this shows the end, what that looks like on the end. It's coming out of the top of this pupating 5th instar. And that's what it looks like on the top. It just looks like a bunch of darning hooks.
Yeah.
Watch closely now. We've zoomed into the area where the rear legs are connected to the silk button. A little black stem called the cremaster will soon show up at the right-hand side at the very top of the pupa, and it will reach around the skin so that it can poke its Velcro-like tip into the silk button. Here it comes. You can see it trying to pull out from under the skin, a little black stick at the top of the pupa. It's pushing on the skin now. Now it's reaching around the skin. Now it's reaching a little farther. It's reaching again. One more should do it. Poke. No, one more try. There it goes. cremaster has contacted the silk, and now suddenly the pupa's motion changes. Whereas before it was a pushing motion, pushing that skin up. Now it's a rotating, gyrating motion as it attempts to dislodge that skin to get it out of the way. The skin, which previously provided all of the support for the pupa, now is deemed useless and must be removed. The connection that was holding it before is now broken, and only the cremaster is holding it to the silk button. It continues to gyrate for a few seconds more to make sure that the skin is gone. And when it's finally satisfied that the skin is gone, it will hang here relatively motionless, although it still twitches from time to time.
So that's what it looks like in a few hours. And it's going to be looking like that for the next probably 10 days. And then somewhere around 10, 11 days, you start to see the colors of the wings and the butterfly's abdomen inside the transparent chrysalis skin. Here's a little video showing one coming out. It's called the closing. Oops, sorry.
After 8 or 9 days, the chrysalis begins to darken, and the following morning it is completely black except for the orange wings showing through. When the time is right, the butterfly begins to push, and you can see that a crack has formed in the chrysalis' smooth skin. The butterfly's head and legs are pushing part of the chrysalis away from the rest of it, and it will continue to push little by little until the opening is big enough for the abdomen to slide down and flip out. But the legs will continue to hold on to the chrysalis so that the butterfly doesn't fall. The abdomen is beginning to loosen from the top of the chrysalis now, as the head and legs continue to push the open flap farther away. Now the back is out, and slowly it begins to slide down. Until at last the abdomen can slip free of the chrysalis, and then the wingtips do likewise.
See how fat the abdomen is.
The abdomen is, and how small the wings are. Doesn't look like a normal butterfly yet, but it soon will.
So here's how you tell the difference between a male. The males and the females. Males have 2 scent glands on their hind wings, and you notice the veins are very thin compared to females.
The females don't have the scent glands, those fat dots on the hind wings.
So it's pretty easy to tell them apart. There are differences in the ends of the abdomen too, of course. The male has anyway, devices to hold the female, as the female gets what they call a spermophore from the males, and that contains not just sperm but nutrition for the females. So here are the nectaring flowers that they're using right now. They don't need milkweed anymore now. They need things like goldenrod and asters And the top one is a PGA hydrangea. And the another one on the right there is a chrysalis that was under a leaf. So there's a female nectarine. So pieweed is another favorite weed. We have 3 or 4 Joe pie. You can buy Joe pieweed in nurseries.
Have them in our garden.
And here's the proboscis at the end of the arrow there. You see it comes out of the head and goes down into the flower to suck out the nectar. And here we are. That's what we were doing today. We caught 85 today. Tagged them and let them go. Occasionally, when they're migrating, they form clusters at night. Sometimes you see them forming just as it's getting end of the day, like maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock. Sometimes there'll be hundreds or even thousands of them in one cluster. And there's quite a few usually circulating around outside the cluster itself. And so here's one we've netted. You see it in the bottom of the net there. And here we are tagging it. The scales on monarchs are very well attached to the substrate underneath. So you can handle them like this without hurting them. And you just press that tag on that big cell there. It's called the discal cell. And it's the center of gravity of the monarch. And it weighs about 2% of the body weight of the butterfly.
So it doesn't affect their flying.
So here's one that's been tagged. And there's what it looks like after it's tagged. Here I am releasing one. And here's Sheila releasing some that we tagged the night before.
Usually when we are tagging, we release them while we're out in the field. But we have had to collect several and keep them in this tent. So that's why this is unusual that we have so many in the tent.
Yeah. So it's really quite exciting to catch one that's got a tag on it already. And that's happened to us, I think it's just this one time. And then one of ours, 3 or 4 years ago, we tagged it here in Oshawa, and the very next day somebody photographed it downtown in Toronto.
So it had flown from Oshawa to Toronto.
We've had, yeah. We've had one discovered and photographed in Kentucky, 2 in Michigan, and then several 130 down in Mexico. So one of the things that tagging has shown is the different flyways that they were using. So they've discovered there's, 3 or 4 flyways, and the one is sort of in the middle there, running through the Midwest of the States, is the one that has more than any other in it when they're migrating. So just a little bit about our own. I've already told you we had 100 recovered, 130 recovered, and 1 in Kentucky, 2 in Michigan. The earliest date, which we tagged a monarch and then it was recovered in Mexico, was tagged on August the 15th in Perry Sound. And the one that was the latest departure date for a monarch tag in Ontario was October the 4th. So that's your window to get the tags on them. And certainly you want to have them, you want to have most of them done by the 3rd week in September. Then you come home and well, we're writing the data while we're out in the field, and then Sheila does that. And when we get home, I put them into the computer on an Excel sheet. And then at the end of the year, we transfer the data to the Ministry of Natural Resources and to the University of Kansas. We're going to public school in Rouge, West Rouge, where our grandchildren started. I guess it's probably 10 years now. Anyway, there's some pictures of kids releasing monarchs out in the schoolyard and waving goodbye, wishing them well on their trip to Mexico. And then at Faith United, we do this once a year too. And Mark, you may recognize some of those folks. This is a friend of ours after a release. Now this is a quick picture of, there are about 12 sites, sanctuaries down in Mexico. You can see Mexico City over at the right there, so just west of Mexico City in the volcanic mountain range. They spend most of their time in that's what they call a reproductive diapause, something like a hibernation, although they can still, as the sun warms them up, they can still leave the trees and go down and puddle, take a drink, go back to the trees. Between 9,000 and 11,000 feet above sea level is their optimum niche to spend the winter. They need that kind of refrigeration that cools them down enough that they don't lose all their stored fat, but doesn't get so cold that they freeze and die. We went down to Mexico ourselves in 2004. It was an amazing experience. There's thousands of monarchs, millions of monarchs everywhere. Those are monarchs on the bark, on the trunk of that tree. Sometimes the branches have so many monarchs on them, the branches actually break. And then when occasionally they get a freeze, and that's what you see on the forest floor. And it was like that the year we were there. The illegal logging has thinned out the canopy, so they're more apt to get wet now. And when they get wet and then they get cold weather, they're more apt to die. So that reddish top of the trees there, not just the top. But anyway, that's all monarch butterflies, millions of them. So they measure them in hectares. And then they have a formula for converting hectares into total monarchs. There's 40,000. And there's the pattern. You see back in 97, there was those 18.19 hectares represented about 900 million monarchs. So you can see what's happened on the decline over the years, although the last few years have created some hope that they are recovering to some degree. But because of all that stuff you heard about in that video at the beginning, especially with the loss of all that milkweed, it's never going to get back to the close to 1 billion.
And the problem is with that they would still exist, but we wouldn't ever have the migration up to Canada again. So that would be really sad. We never saw another monarch.
There is a resident population in Florida that does not migrate. It stays there all year round. So these are things that you can all do. Plant native milkweed, provide nectar plants. Don't use pesticides. And if you want to report your monarch observations, the Monarch Watch would be glad to hear from you. When we need to try to help people, especially, municipal people who are cutting roadside grass and stuff, not to cut it like right now when monarchs are still developing on the milkweed. If they're going to cut it, they need to cut it maybe once midsummer so it regenerates. And then by now it's nice and new and fresh again.
So the number 2 there, where it says provide nectar plants. So that would be something like corn. Okay, so cornflowers.
There's the three milkweeds. The second and third ones, butterfly milkweed or butterfly weed and swamp milkweed, you can buy in nurseries. And here's a list of perennials that you can plant. You will have heard most of them. So that's what they need now. They need places where the adults can get their nectar.
They love the New England asters, the one fourth down on the right hand side. And the blazing star, the bee balm, Joe Pye weed. These seem to be their favorites in our garden. We have all these in our garden.
That was really good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Sheila.
Yes. Any question?
Yes, I have one question. You mentioned native milkweed plants. It's my understanding that they only, so should I say, eat and breed on one type of milkweed, and there's other types of milkweed they will not touch. Is that true?
In a word, no. They certainly favor the common milkweed, the one you see growing in lots of places. But they will definitely use those other 2 species, the swamp and the butterfly weed. And I think that you may be referring to the fact that a lot of people now are growing tropical milkweed here. And although they will use it, the problem is it blooms well beyond the time they need to be leaving. And so it's, in some cases, it's delayed their departure enough that they weren't able to make it to Mexico because the nectaring wildflowers on the way down have already dried up. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Is there a Canadian group that keeps track of the numbers and what's coming into Canada? Or
I'm not sure I understand, sorry.
is there a Canadian group that's keeping track of the numbers and how many there are in Canada?
Well, there are places like Point Pelee, for instance, where one of the citizen scientists, she lives down there, and she makes a point of every September to be near the point, and she actually makes estimates of how many there are. Like last week, she had one day she counted 1,500. So the number of places like that where people, especially where they're already watching for hawks, they also will count monarchs as they go by.
Yeah.
But there's, I mean, in terms of analyzing the data that's generated by the tagging program, that's all done at University of Kansas.
Okay.
We send our information in on those Excel sheets at the end of the year, and then they send people down to Mexico in March, and they pay the local folks $5 for each tag that they recovered. So it motivates them to look for them. For some people, that's a day's wage down there.
Yeah.
And that's how they recover most of the ones in Mexico. So then they publish the ones that are recovered, and then we identify them. We all cheer every time we get one that's ours.
Okay.
That's cool.
But as you can see from that picture, there are millions. The year we were there in 2004, millions of dead butterflies on the floor that obviously never get examined or a tag. So the 130 that we've had found down there, that would be not the total number of ours that fought there, but just the total number that they have actually found on the forest floor.
That year we were down there, I was hoping to find a tag one, so I got off the trail. I was out amongst the fallen butterflies. The guy told me to get the hell out of there because he didn't want me getting his $5, right? So I bought one from him.
Well, the other thing is that the Mexicans, when they saw these years ago, their belief was that these butterflies, they didn't know where they came from. They were the souls of their ancestors that were returning. So for them, this is a very spiritual thing. They don't want you stepping on their ancestors, right? So that was.
I was violating two no-nos.
Yeah.
Do you know the name of the migratory butterfly on the European continent?
I don't know.
I think it's the alpine.
I really
and it actually migrates a further distance.
Really? From where to where?
I think it's more west to east type of migration with them.
Well, I think I did read about that. And a lot of it's crossing the desert, I think, at some point.
It could be.
Yeah.
Because they go aloft. They go quite high on the slipstream up there. The higher air currents.
Monarchs ride the current too. They've been spotted by airplanes 5,000 feet in the air.
Yeah. I'll have to look that up. I think it's the it's alpine or something along that line.
I remember reading about that. Yeah, I can't remember the name of them. I was surprised because, you know, I don't know whether it's mythology or wishful thinking by American scientists, but they've always been, you know, touting the fact this is the longest insect migration on Mother Earth.
They're also quite colorful, but not the same colors.
Oh, I think the colors are partly, maybe mainly due to the that toxic latex that they ingest. Because all the milkweed bugs and beetles all have black and red on them too. So.
Right.
You say you think that's called the alpine butterfly? Did you say?
Alpine, yeah.
Alpine?
Callie, you said alpine?
Yeah, or something of that. My memory is not serving me well.
There is another butterfly, the viceroy. I should probably have shown you a picture of it, but just looking at it, you'd swear it was a monarch. And they think it may have evolved mimicking the monarch color pattern because it protects them from being eaten by most birds. But it's got an extra wing vein on both hind wings. When you know the difference, they're quite easy to see, and they fly in a very different pattern. But just to look at them, they look almost like twins.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sometimes I see this yellowish color monarch that is identical to the orange one. And the one I saw was relatively close to the train tracks on Brock Street and Victoria.
So it was actually black with a red streak across it.
Well, it's the wings looks exactly like black with little white dots, and the inside wings is yellow instead of orange. And they're a bit smaller than the Monarch.
Could be a swallowtail. The red admiral also sometimes gets confused with monarchs. It does have both. It's black and red too, but its color pattern is very different. I'd have to have a good look at it to know for sure. That doesn't sound like a monarch though.
Well, they go where I'm part of a community garden in Whitby, and it's called St. John Anglican Church Port Whitby Community Garden.
Oh.
And you see one or two monarch flying.
Yeah.
And then there's this yellow one that follows, but it doesn't care of the monarch, but it's wandering around. So you're like, what's going on with nature?
It could be the tiger swallowtail.
Uh-huh.
It's yellow. Yeah, got red, black veins. Yeah, a little smaller.
There's a butterfly in Europe that flies quite a long distance called the painted lady. Maybe that's what Cal was trying to think of.
Oh, we have those here too. We have two painted ladies.
Oh, we have them in North America?
Yes. Oh. There's American painted lady and just the painted lady. They have a little bit different patterns of wings, but school teachers quite often use them to do metamorphoses in their classes because by the time the monarchs get here, it's into June, so there's not time for the classes to see the metamorphosis. But the painted ladies, they can get through the metamorphosis before the end of June.
You can buy them as little caterpillars and raise them and let them free later on. My granddaughters do that. Painted ladies, I mean.
Yes.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, that's it. But it's they go into Africa.
Yeah, painted ladies in Africa. I may have painted ladies. There are a lot of places. I don't know.
Ethiopia.
Jim and Janice, when you were down in Essex County, did you ever go down to the point and do anything? I
used to go down there quite often. I was a cub leader.
Yeah.
There's a cub camp down there that I was part of. And we used to go down there in the wintertime just to look at all the ice floes. But I've never been down there when the monarchs were there.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
So it's on my bucket list.
Yeah. I remember that they found that not all that long ago, I think, didn't they?
I really don't know how long they've known that was a crossover point.
I kind of remember I was living down there at the time anyways when they really announced it anyway, but
the pattern is the monarchs in this area head down to the north shore of Lake Ontario and then follow the north shore along down to Point Pelee.
Oh, okay.
And then they cross over down at Point Pelee. Yeah.
There's not as much water to go over then? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Right.
Is apple spray a problem?
Sorry?
Apple spray? Spraying apple trees.
Any insecticide is not going to be good for them, but it's just on the tree itself. That's not a big worry, that's for sure. What the worry is when they did all this Roundup on on corn and soybean fields in the States especially, they kill all the weeds. They estimate they lost about 100 million acres.
Wow.
Of what was once good milkweed territory. Once they started these GMO crops and the accompanying pesticides, herbicides.
Interesting.
Have lots of milkweed, but very few butterflies. And there are thousands, literally thousands of apples growing in this area.
But where are you?
Thousands of acres of apples.
Where are you?
Newcastle.
Oh.
All around Newcastle and Bowmanville and Port Hope and Brighton, and that's apple country. There's thousands of acres of them.
We have a colleague who's actually tagging at Port Hope in clover fields, and he's tagged almost 1,000 already on these clover fields of Port Hope this summer. Yeah. So it sounds like the apple trees being sprayed is much of a worry for monarchs.
What you said about buying the caterpillars, I built a butterfly house for my wife. She was a kindergarten teacher. She just retired this year. So she sold it to one of her colleagues. But she said, "Where did you buy that?" And she said, "You can't buy them." So, but yeah, and they used to get the caterpillars, and then they would hang, and then they would take them out the field, they would release them. But the kindergarten kids just had a hoot watching these things form and then releasing the butterfly.
Yeah. That's what a lot of teachers use the painted ladies for, because they get to see all of that. They do, one thing they've learned is that monarchs that are reared indoors are about 7 times less likely to get to Mexico than the ones that are reared naturally or reared outside. And I think part of it is that being inside, they miss the rhythms of daylight and dark. And if the house is air conditioned, they're probably in a much cooler space than they would be if they're outside. So that slows down their development. And they really need these outdoor clues to know which direction to head. And on average, reared indoor ones are smaller than the ones that grow up naturally outside, which is probably partly due to the, evolution, natural selection. Outside, the weak ones get eliminated. Indoors, the ones that carry disease and so on can be nicely look okay and be released and not be well at all.
Sounds as though they eventually get eliminated anyway if they don't get to Mexico.
That's true. The migration is a filtering process. And then by the time they get there, only the largest, healthiest ones are going to get there. But still 7 times more likely to get there if they're outside rather than inside when they're growing up.
Can you tell how healthy they are when you tag them?
When I tag the reared ones, I check them for that disease that you saw in the video.
Yeah.
And I do that what they showed you. I take Scotch tape, I take some scales off their abdomen and put it under the microscope and look for the spores.
You do that then, do you?
I do, yeah.
That's cool.
So last year I wasn't as careful as I needed to be when I was rearing them. I had to euthanize about half of them.
Yeah.
But this year I've only had one that had a very mild infection. I think the main difference is I'm rearing them very early in separate containers. So I only have one of them in one container that's big enough for them to eclose in, for the wings to expand. But it means I've got to find. Well, I sterilize the jars after I'm finished with them, yeah. So I start with a clean jar, and then there's only one ever in that jar. So it's worked out a lot better this year.
We like to rear them, at least
some.
We're doing about 40 this year. for teaching purposes. So like our neighbors, we have a sign out that we're at Monarch Way Station. And so people stop and ask us, and we've had probably 8 or 10 of our neighbors take a chrysalis home, and you know the kids get to see any clothes, and it's a wonderful thing.
Well,
or when we go to the schools too, so we're using them as a teaching tool.
When we're out tagging, people come by and want to know what we're doing, right? I think some of them are ready to chastise us for harming butterflies. One of the reasons we wear these shirts, right? But I have official permission from the Ministry of Natural Resources. I have it written that I can be out there doing this. But quite often, you know, especially if they're young kids, you know, we stop and ask them if they want to be part of tagging monarchs. So that happened again today. And almost every time we're out, it happens once or twice. So once again, I hand them the monarch, you know, tell them how to hold it, and then they just release it the way it goes.
Magical.
What I wanted to know is how come there's no monarch in those butterfly places? Like I was at Niagara Falls, and they had this botanic area, and then they had the butterfly inside.
Yeah.
And I had a few that were parked on my back. But what I wanted to know is I'd never seen monarch in that facility, only the other species. So is there a reason why monarchs are not preserved?
What time of the year was it?
It was in summer.
Okay. I don't know. We went into one of those reserves or whatever you call them. Anyway, when we were in Newfoundland, and they actually had monarchs there, even though monarchs really they're not part of the Newfoundland biome, but they had to buy them, and they were fairly expensive to buy. But they did have milkweed growing and monarchs flying around in Newfoundland inside.
Greg, you're talking about the live butterflies flying around this.
Yeah. They were live. Even in Montreal, there's I think I forget if it was the insectarium they call it.
One near Kitchener, I think too.
No, I mean Montreal. My birth province is Montreal, and I was with my sister, and there was a place where there was butterflies, but I never seen monarch in that place too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe they're trying to show people the butterflies that they wouldn't see themselves by walking around the town, you know, so perhaps they were specializing with butterflies from Australia or Africa.
Yeah. Montreal's getting near the edge of their range in Canada. There's some in Winnipeg, but as far as I know, they hardly ever make it to Newfoundland.
So if they go too far, then they just can't get back? Is that the problem?
The problem in Newfoundland is no milkweed.
Do they know where to navigate? Because if they're born here, they haven't been south, but they seem to be able to find their way south to where they're supposed to go. Okay.
It's amazing, eh? And it's the great-great-grandchildren that are going there, the same trees that their great-great-grandparents left.
Is that like an instinct then, do you think, or?
Obviously, there's some genetic core to it. Yeah, they're still trying to figure that out. They think, like I say, the angle of the sun is one of the big issues. but that one graph I showed you there with the flyways, they did one experiment. They took some from the flyway that's going like through the center of the states. So it hadn't pretty well due south. They took a bunch of them, moved them over to the East Coast. And then for the first 24, 48 hours, they kept heading straight south, and they were going to be out in the ocean, right? But within, I think it was 2 days, they had reoriented themselves to a southwest direction.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's amazing, the size of that brain, a pinhead, and it stores a lot of information.
How many grams do they weigh?
About a half a gram.
Half a gram, wow.
Yeah.
And how much nectar do they consume when they are adults?
I've never seen it quantified. But when we're netting them, on a day like today, when they're sitting on the flowers, the goldenrod, they're so focused, you can walk almost up to them before you stir them. And they spend hours just nectaring.
Wow.
The other thing we do know is that their body weight is greater when they arrive in Mexico than it is when they leave here. So they're drinking all the way down.
Do you measure their weight here?
We haven't done that, but some people do.
Okay.
Does the milkweed have to be a certain size before they'll eat it? If I have small milkweed plants because they just grew too close together, will they still successfully consume that?
Somewhat surprisingly, they prefer the smaller ones.
More tender.
I think so, yeah. And sometimes we found an egg on, one that's only about 3 inches high. And, it wouldn't take long for the larva to eat the whole plant. So then it would have to move to find another plant. But we've also, in Perry Sound, one day we measured the distance between the closest milkweed plant to the fifth instar larva that we found. And it was something like 60 yards. It had to have walked to get to where it was. They're just amazing creatures.
And they don't move all that fast, I wouldn't imagine.
No, they don't. No.
Okay, kill it.
Are there any other, my husband wants to know if there's any other types of insects who eat the milkweed in competition to them that could give them trouble.
Good question.
Yeah, there is. The milkweed beetle or bug, there's a bug and a beetle, but I think they both eat the leaves. The tussock moths, they'll lay a cluster of eggs on one leaf and maybe 60, 70 eggs. And by the time they hatch and eat, they're going to eat the whole plant sometimes. It's just bare. So I guess those would be the main ones.
We should say the tussock moth larva.
The larvae, yeah.
And it's about a little over an inch and a quarter long, and it's very hairy.
Yeah, they're quite characteristic. They're easy to identify.
They're much smaller also, and different. They're hairy. Whereas the monarch larva is smooth. But yeah, they'll decimate the plant very quickly.
You also have, predators there too. That those same beetles will eat ants and spiders and snails. There's a lot of. I think in the wild, something like 1 or 2% of them make it from egg to adult.
That's why the female has to lay so many eggs. On average, 500.
Have you done any photography with the butterflies? Like, do you set out a camera on a stand or something to catch them or anything like that?
I have hundreds of pictures of monarchs.
That's his other hobby is photography. So we have, in fact, we had guests here from Ottawa a couple of years ago, and their little grandson, who's, obviously gets up very early, like little kids do. And so his dad was trying to keep him quiet, and he said, "How would it be if you go around the house and count how many butterflies you feed?" And it kept him busy for a long time. He told us we had 78.
I think they're hybrid.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
But 78
Pictures of monarchs.
pictures of monarchs. So I don't know. We have them everywhere.
I've got a really good video of the adult coming out of the chrysalis. I've got pictures of all the stages, but especially the adults. I've got lots of. Anybody wants a picture that's frameable, I'll be glad to send it to you.
Do you use a special close-up lens?
Or when I'm doing the eggs and the early larvae, I do, yeah. It's actually a reversal lens. So it's like turning a binocular the other way around and looking at it to do it the other way.
That was a very nice presentation, Jim. I really enjoyed that. And Jen,
Thank you.
Sheila.
Thanks very much for inviting us.
Good night.
Yeah.
Jim, I would have to find a way to give you or send you our club USB.
Oh, that's nice.
We usually give that for presenters, and it's a 16 gig USB, but it also has Windows 10 for in case you have an issue with your desktop or laptop and you want to recover. You can use it, and it also has a data storage space where you can save your personal stuff or your butterfly information into it.
Oh, cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What
I was expecting that.
You could give it to Mark, and Mark could give it to us, unless you want to.
I can get it to them anyways. So.
Yes.
Brad.
Yeah, Linda.
Two.
Yeah.
Two presenters.
Two presenters.
Yeah, two. Yes. Sorry.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that, guys.
This is actually our wedding anniversary today.
Anniversary.
54.
That's awesome.
But this is a one presenter thing, really. But thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jim and Jen and Sheila.